The dining table was a battlefield, and I was losing before the first fork was even raised. Mark's mother, Eleanor, had just set down her wine glass with that delicate little clink she always made when she was about to deliver a knockout punch wrapped in velvet. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as my husband's, swept over me like I was a piece of furniture she'd inherited and never quite liked. "So, Amy," she said, her voice carrying that sing-song quality that made my teeth ache, "I heard you've been picking up extra shifts at the hospital. How noble of you. Though I suppose someone has to pay for all that ambition." Mark's hand found mine under the table, gave it a quick squeeze. A warning. A plea. The same gesture he'd made 1,000 times before. "Mom," he started, his voice soft and conciliatory. "I'm just making conversation, Mark. Don't be so sensitive." Eleanor's smile never wavered. "I was just thinking about how different things were when I was your age. I didn't have to work. Your father made sure of that. But then again, I married well, didn't I?" The words landed like small, precise knives. I'd heard this particular variation before. The comparison between me and her. Between my mother and her. Between everything I was and everything I wasn't. I pulled my hand back from Mark's and reached for my water glass. The ice had long since melted, but I drank anyway. "Anything to fill the silence. That's lovely, Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice level. "You were very fortunate." "Fortunate," she laughed, that brittle, practiced sound. "Darling, fortune had nothing to do with it. Your mother, for instance. She was a waitress, wasn't she, at that little diner on the south side, the one with the sticky floors and the god-awful coffee?" Mark's knuckles went white against the tablecloth. "Mom, that's enough." But Eleanor was on a roll now, her eyes gleaming with the particular joy of someone who knew she was being cruel and enjoyed it thoroughly. "I'm just saying, there are choices we make in life. And choices have consequences. Your mother made hers, and you, well, you've made yours." She picked up her fork, speared a piece of roasted asparagus, and examined it like it had personally offended her. "Speaking of which, that cute little apartment you two are living in. The one with the leaky faucet and the broken dishwasher. Have you fixed that yet? I remember you complaining about it at Thanksgiving." The heat was rising up my neck, spreading across my cheeks. I could feel the eyes of the other diners at the upscale restaurant flicking toward us, sensing the tension at our table. This was her arena, her stage. And I was just the supporting actress in her one-woman show. "We're managing just fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Managing. She savored the word. "Isn't that just the saddest thing your daughter-in-law is, managing?" She turned to Mark, as if I'd ceased to exist. "Mark, darling, I worry about you. You work so hard, and you come home to this." She waved her hand vaguely in my direction. Mark's jaw was tight. I could see the muscle twitching in his cheek. He was fighting his own battle inside his head, the one he always fought. The one between defending his wife and placating his mother. "Amy's a nurse, Mom. She works hard. She's dedicated." "Oh, I'm sure she is. But dedication and $1 will get you a cup of coffee. And speaking of coffee, did you know she wanted to open a bakery, a bakery?" Can you imagine? She laughed again, and this time it was louder, more theatrical. What on earth would she know about running a business? Her mother, God rest her soul, ran a diner, and look how that turned out. It shut down the moment she passed. Not exactly a family legacy. I saw red. It wasn't a metaphorical red. It was actual, physical heat behind my eyes, a roaring in my ears. She'd been circling this topic for 3 years. 3 years of sly comments and backhanded compliments. 3 years of "I'm just saying" and "I'm just joking." 3 years of sitting at tables just like this one, smiling through gritted teeth while she dissected my life like a surgeon with no anesthetic. But this was different. This was my mother. My mother who had worked double shifts for 20 years to put me through school. My mother who had never complained, never asked for help, never once made me feel like I was a burden. My mother who had died alone in that tiny apartment, found by the landlord 3 days later. Eleanor. My voice was shaking, but I couldn't stop it. "I need you to stop." She blinked, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. "Pardon. I said, I need you to stop. I set my water glass down with more force than I'd intended. Water sloshed over the rim, spreading across the white tablecloth. You've been making these comments for years. About my mother.
About my job.
About my life. You think I don't notice. You think I don't hear every single word. Eleanor's face shifted. The practiced smile faltered, replaced by something colder. More calculating. Amy, I was simply trying to have a conversation. There's no need to get hysterical. I'm not hysterical.
I'm angry.
There's a difference. And you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of sitting here, smiling, pretending like it doesn't hurt when you call my mother a failure. When you imply that I'm not good enough for your son. When you treat me like I'm some kind of charity case you're forced to tolerate. Mark grabbed my arm. Amy, stop. This isn't the place. Let's just get through dinner, okay? No. I pulled my arm free. No, I'm not going to get through dinner. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm done. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms.
Well.
I always knew you had a temper. You were so quiet at first. I thought perhaps you were just shy. But now I see you were just waiting to show your true colors, weren't you? Mom, Mark said, his voice strained.
Please.
Let's just finish our meal. Oh, I'm perfectly happy to finish the meal. But if your wife is going to make a scene in public, I think we should address it now. She turned back to me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You know what your problem is. Amy, you have no sense of humor.
Everything is so serious with you.
Everything is a personal attack. I make one little joke about your mother's diner, and you act like I've run over your dog. It's not one little joke. It's 100 little jokes. 1,000 little jokes. Every single time we're together, you find a way to bring her up, to tear her down. And you hide behind this. I was just joking nonsense because you know you can get away with it. Get away with it, Eleanor laughed, shaking her head. Get away with what being your mother-in-law, being someone who just wants the best for her son. She turned to Mark, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Mark, darling, I think you need to have a talk with your wife. She's obviously overworked. Or perhaps it's something else. A chemical imbalance. My friend Cynthia's daughter had something similar. They put her on medication, and she was a completely different person. Much more manageable. The word manageable hit me like a slap. That's what I was to them. Something to be managed. Something to be tolerated. Something to be fixed. I'm leaving, I said, pushing my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor, drawing the attention of the table next to us. I can't do this. I won't do this. Amy, sit down. Mark's voice had an edge to it now, a warning. We're in public. Don't make a scene. Make a scene. Your mother has been making a scene for 3 years, and you've never once told her to stop. You've never defended me. Not once. You just sit there and let her tear me apart, and then you have the audacity to tell me to calm down. Mark's face flushed. That's not fair. I'm just trying to keep the peace. Keep the peace for who? For you, because it certainly isn't for me. I grabbed my purse from the back of the chair, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I'm done keeping the peace. I'm done being quiet. I'm done being the bigger person. Eleanor watched me with a satisfied smile, the kind of smile that said she'd won. She'd finally gotten me to break, and she was loving every second of it. Fine, I said, my voice steadier now. You want me to go? I'll go. But I want you to remember this moment, Eleanor. I want you to remember that you pushed me out, not the other way around. I pulled out my wallet, fumbling with the clasp. My hands were clumsy, jerky. I yanked out $100 bill and slapped it on the table. Here, I said, my voice shaking. For my half of dinner. For my half of everything I've ever been expected to contribute to this family. Consider it paid in full. Eleanor stared at the money like it was a dead fish. What are you doing? I'm paying my fees, I said, my voice cold. You always said if I didn't like it, I could pay the fees and go away. Well, here it is. Consider this the final payment. Amy, this is ridiculous. Mark stood up, reaching for me. We can talk about this at home. We can. There's nothing to talk about. I stepped back, out of his reach. I'm done. I'm done with your mother. I'm done with you. I'm done with all of it. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The autumn air hit me like a wave, cold and sharp against my flushed skin. I kept walking past the valet stand, past the line of waiting cars, past the little fountain in the center of the courtyard. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys until the door finally opened. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I could still hear Eleanor's laugh, could still see that smug expression on her face. And I could still see Mark's face, frozen in that familiar expression of helpless surrender. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down my cheeks. I didn't try to stop them. I let them come, let them wash away 3 years of swallowed insults and buried resentments. 3 years of being the good wife, the understanding daughter-in-law, the woman who never complained, never pushed back, never made a scene. Well, I'd made a scene tonight. And I didn't regret it. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out, staring at the screen through blurry eyes. Mark was calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then again. And again. Finally, I turned the phone off and dropped it back in my purse. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, driving without direction, without purpose. I just needed to move. Needed to get away from that place, from that moment, from everything I just walked away from. I drove for 15 minutes before I realized where I was going. My mother's old apartment building. The one she'd lived in her whole life. The one I'd grown up in. It was a small building, run down, nestled in a quiet neighborhood of faded homes and overgrown yards. The landlord had sold it years ago, and it had been converted into condos. The tenants had changed. Everything had changed. But the street was the same. The street where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd walked to school, where I'd sat on the front steps and watched my mother walk home from the diner, her feet aching, her smile tired but genuine. The street where my mother had told me over and over that I was going to be somebody, that I was going to make something of myself, that I was worth more than the world gave me credit for. That I pulled over to the curb and killed the engine. I sat there in the silence, staring at the building that had once been my home. The lights were on in the second-floor apartment, the one my mother had lived in. Some stranger was living there now, making their own memories, their own history. But I could still see her. Could still see her at the window, waving down at me as I walked home from school. Could still see her at the stove, cooking me dinner with whatever ingredients she'd managed to scrape together. Could still see her at the kitchen table, teaching me to do my homework even though she'd never finished high school herself. She'd given me everything. Everything she had. And I'd let Eleanor tear her memory apart, again and again, because I was too afraid to fight back. No more. I pulled out my phone again, turning it back on. The screen was flooded with notifications. Missed calls. Text messages. I ignored them all and opened my email. There was a new message from my bank, subject line. Important notice regarding your account. I opened it, my heart pounding. The message was brief, but the words made my breath catch in my throat. Dear Ms. Carter, this is to confirm the recent deposit of $3,470,000 into your account. The funds originated from the Arthur J. Peterson estate and have been released as per the terms of the trust established by your late mother, Dorothy M. Carter. I read it again, and again. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. $3.4 million. My mother had left me $3.4 million. I didn't know she had money. I didn't know she had a trust. I didn't know she had anything at all. She'd lived so simply, so quietly. She'd never mentioned anything about an inheritance, never hinted that I might someday be taken care of. But she'd been planning for me. She'd been protecting me. Even after she was gone, she was still protecting me. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, and I laughed. I laughed until I couldn't breathe, until the tears were streaming down my face again. Only this time, they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of relief.
Of joy.
Of sheer, overwhelming disbelief. Mark was calling again. I picked up. Amy, thank God. Where are you? I've been calling for an hour.
You can't just walk out like that.
We need to talk. I'm at my mother's old apartment, I said, cutting him off. Remember her? Mark, the woman your mother spent years mocking, the woman who worked double shifts so I could have a chance at a better life. Amy, please just come home. We can figure this out.
No, Mark.
We can't figure this out. My voice was steady now, cold. Because I've already figured it out. I've figured out that I deserve better. I've figured out that I don't need to spend the rest of my life apologizing for who I am. And I've figured out that I have all the resources I need to walk away from you and never look back. What are you talking about? What resources? That's the thing, Mark. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Your mother always thought I was a charity case. She thought my mother was a failure. She thought I was lucky to marry into your family, lucky to be tolerated by people who looked down on me. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. But I'm not lucky, Mark. I never was. I'm just the daughter of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. A woman who left me with something your mother could never understand. Something your whole family will never have. Amy, you're not making any sense. Just tell me where you are. I'll come get you. You don't need to come get me. I'm not coming home. I started the engine, the car rumbling to life beneath me. I'm done, Mark. Done with your family, done with your excuses, done with everything. You can tell Eleanor I paid my fees. The final bill is settled. And she can take her jokes and her insults and shove them straight back into her mouth where they belong. Amy, wait. No, you wait. You wait for the divorce papers. Because they're coming, Mark. And this time, I'm the one in control. I hung up before he could respond. The silence in the car was deafening, but it was a good silence. A clean silence. The silence of a chapter closing. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, driving home to an apartment that no longer felt like home. But that was okay, because I had a plan now. And for the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The apartment felt hollow when I walked through the door. Not empty, exactly. Mark's things were still there, scattered like evidence of a life I no longer wanted. His golf clubs leaned against the wall by the coat closet. His reading glasses sat on the coffee table next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. A pair of his shoes, the ones with the scuffed toes he always meant to get repaired, were kicked off by the sofa like they always were. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked at it all. The leather recliner he'd bought without consulting me. The flat-screen television that took up half the wall. The framed photo of his college rowing team, 8 grinning young men in matching blazers, the kind of people who'd never had to worry about where their next meal was coming from. My mother's photo was still on the bookshelf, tucked behind a row of Mark's business books. I walked over and picked it up, holding it close to my chest. She was smiling in that way she always did, a smile that had seen too many hard days, but refused to stop. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform slightly wrinkled from a long shift. She looked tired, but she looked happy too. Happy to be alive. Happy to have me. $3.4 million, I whispered to her. You knew, didn't you, all those years we struggled, all those times I watched you count out change for groceries, you knew there was money waiting. And you never said a word. I didn't expect an answer, but I felt one anyway. A warmth spreading through my chest, a sense of her presence in that quiet room. She'd always been like that.
Quiet. Steady.
She didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the strongest. The front door opened. Mark walked in, his face pale, his eyes wide with something that looked like a mixture of panic and confusion. He'd driven straight home from wherever he'd been searching for me. He still had his jacket on, still had that stunned expression I'd seen on his face in the restaurant. Amy, we need to talk. Then talk. I didn't turn to face him. I kept my eyes on my mother's photo. What happened tonight, it was bad. I know it was bad, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can what, Mark? I finally turned, setting the photo down carefully on the bookshelf. Can make your mother stop being cruel, can make you grow a spine, can undo 3 years of being treated like I'm not good enough for this family, he flinched. That's not what I'm saying. I know my mom can be difficult, but she's old. She's set in her ways. I can't change her. I can only try to manage the situation. Manage. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You keep using that word. Manage. Like I'm a problem to be solved. Like I'm a burden you have to carry. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I stepped closer to him, my voice rising. Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 3 years watching me get torn apart by your mother. You've sat there, silent, while she took shots at my mother, at my job, and my entire existence. And when I finally stood up for myself, you told me to calm down. Mark's face went red. I didn't know how to handle it. You were both fighting, and I was stuck in the middle. You were supposed to be on my side. I shouted the words, surprising myself. That's what marriage means, Mark. You're supposed to have my back. You're supposed to be my partner. But you've never been that. You've been her son, first and always. I was just the woman you married to make her happy. That's not true. He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched. I love you, Amy. I've always loved you. Then why didn't you ever fight for me? Why did you let her say all those things? Why did you let her call my mother a failure, night after night, dinner after dinner, and never once tell her to stop? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I watched him struggle, watched him try to find the words that would make everything better. But the words weren't there. They never had been, because I'm weak, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I was scared of her. I've been scared of her my whole life. She's always been this force, this presence in my life, and I didn't know how to stand up to her. I still don't. I felt something shift inside me. Not pity. Not forgiveness. Something colder. A final, settling certainty that I'd made the right choice. I'm not going to counseling, I said. I'm not going to try to fix this. I'm leaving, Mark. Tonight. His eyes widened. You can't be serious. Where will you go? You don't have anywhere to go. I have options. I walked past him, toward the bedroom. You wouldn't believe what I found out tonight. What are you talking about? I stopped at the bedroom door, turning to face him. My mother. She left me something. Something I didn't know about until today. Something that changes everything. Your mother, she didn't have anything. She worked at a diner. She lived in a crappy apartment. What could she possibly have left you? A trust fund, I said, watching his face. My grandfather, the one I never knew, set up a trust for me. For me, Mark. Not for your family. Not for your mother's precious legacy. For me. $3.4 million. Mark's face went white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. 3.4? Amy, that's impossible. Your mother never had that kind of money. We would have known. No, you wouldn't have. Because she never told anyone. Not even me. She kept it secret all those years because she wanted me to make my own way. She wanted me to be strong. She didn't want me to depend on anyone, especially not people like your mother. Mark shook his head slowly, processing the information. But this money, it changes things. We need to talk about what this means for us. There is no us. I said the words firmly, cleanly. There hasn't been us for a long time. There's just you and your mother and me standing on the outside looking in. Amy, don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built over one argument. It's not one argument. It's hundreds of arguments. It's 1,000 little cuts, 1,000,000 small humiliations, and I am done bleeding for you. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm going to pack my things. I'm going to stay with a friend tonight. And tomorrow, I'm going to talk to a lawyer. A lawyer, Mark's voice cracked. You're really going to do this? You're going to divorce me? I'm going to do whatever I have to do to protect myself. To protect what my mother left me. I walked into the bedroom and grabbed my suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. You should probably call your mother. Tell her she finally got what she wanted. I'm gone. I started filling the suitcase with clothes, moving quickly, mechanically. Mark stood in the doorway, watching me with a mixture of shock and disbelief. He kept trying to talk, to convince me to stay, but the words came out garbled and desperate. I didn't listen. I couldn't afford to listen. Within an hour, I was packed. 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, and a box of my mother's things that I refused to leave behind. I carried them to the door one by one, while Mark watched helplessly. Where will you go? He finally asked. Does it matter? It's not your concern anymore. It is my concern. You're my wife. Not for much longer. I picked up the last bag and stood by the door. I'll call you in a few days. Once I've talked to my lawyer, we can figure out the logistics of the divorce then. Amy, please. Goodbye, Mark. I walked out the door without looking back. I didn't want to see the expression on his face. I didn't want to feel that tiny pang of guilt that was already starting to surface in my chest. I'd spent 3 years feeling guilty for things that weren't my fault. 3 years apologizing for existing. 3 years shrinking myself to fit into his family's narrow expectations. No more did I loaded my things into my car and drove to a motel on the outskirts of town. It was cheap and rundown, the kind of place that rented by the hour and looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. But it was clean enough, and more importantly, it was anonymous. No one would find me here that I checked in, carried my things to the room, and locked the door behind me. The room was small, with faded floral wallpaper and a bed that sagged in the middle. A single window looked out onto the parking lot. There was an old television mounted on the wall, a tiny coffee maker on the dresser, and a bathroom with a shower that dripped constantly. It was the most liberating place I'd ever been that I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I had dozens of missed calls from Mark. A few from Eleanor, which I deleted without reading. A text from Chloe, asking me to call her because the wedding planning was at a critical stage. I deleted that too, then I opened my banking app and stared at the number. $3,470,000. It seemed unreal, like something out of a dream. I'd spent my whole life worrying about money, counting pennies, making ends meet. And now I had more than I'd ever imagined possible. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what the money represented. My mother's sacrifice. Her love. Her refusal to let me become someone who depended on others for validation. She'd given me the gift of independence, and I'd squandered it, letting myself become dependent on Mark's approval, on Eleanor's acceptance, on the illusion of belonging to a family that never really wanted me, and never again did I close the app and pulled up a search engine. I started looking for apartments. Small, affordable places I could rent for a few months while I figured out my next steps. I wasn't going to buy anything yet. I wasn't going to make any big decisions. I was just going to find a place to land, a place to breathe, a place where I could figure out who I was without Mark and Eleanor and all their toxic expectations. By midnight, I'd found 3 potential options. I sent inquiries to all of them, then set my phone down and stared at the ceiling. The motel room was quiet. No television, no music, no Mark snoring beside me. Just silence. I thought about my mother. About all the nights she'd come home from the diner, exhausted and aching, and still found the energy to sit with me while I did my homework. About all the mornings she'd woken up at 5 to make me breakfast before school, even though she'd only gotten a few hours of sleep. About the way she'd always told me I was going to do great things, that I was going to be someone, even when the world told her otherwise. "You did it, Mom," I whispered into the darkness. "You raised someone who could stand on her own. You gave me everything I needed." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what I was going to do with the money or how I was going to build a new life from scratch. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was never going to let anyone make me feel small again. I was never going to apologize for who I was or where I came from. And I was never, ever going to let anyone treat me like I didn't belong. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains, pulling me from a dreamless sleep. I blinked, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where I was. The motel room. The sagging bed. The new life waiting for me just outside the door. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, and walked out to the parking lot. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint smell of autumn leaves and diesel fuel from the nearby highway. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, feeling the weight of the past 3 years lifting from my shoulders. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting it to be Mark again. But it wasn't. It was a notification from one of the apartment listings I'd messaged. They had a showing available this morning. Could I come by? I smiled. A small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. "I'm on my way," I typed back. Then I got in my car and drove toward my future. The apartment was perfect. It was a small 2-bedroom in a converted Victorian house, nestled on a tree-lined street in the older part of town. The landlord, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Patterson, showed me around with a warm smile and an easy manner that put me at ease immediately. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, a clawfoot tub in the bathroom, and a tiny kitchen with a window that looked out onto a garden overgrown with wild roses. It was nothing like the sterile, beige-on-beige condo Eleanor had decorated with such calculated precision. It was real. It was alive. It was mine. I signed the lease that afternoon. A year's lease, paid up front in cash. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up when I handed her the stack of bills, but she didn't ask questions. She just smiled, handed me the keys, and wished me well that I moved in 2 days later. The process was quick and efficient. I didn't have much to move, just the things I'd taken from the apartment. A few boxes of clothes, my mother's photo, some books and kitchen supplies. The rest could stay. I didn't want any of it. The first night in the new apartment was strange. I sat on the floor of the empty living room, surrounded by boxes, eating takeout from a cardboard container. The silence was heavy, pressing in from all sides. But it wasn't an oppressive silence. It was a peaceful one. A silence that said, "You're safe here. You can breathe." I unpacked my mother's photo first, placing it on the mantelpiece. The fireplace was old, original to the house, with a worn brick surround and a wooden mantel that had seen decades of use. I ran my fingers along the grain of the wood, thinking about all the people who'd lived here before me. All the lives that had unfolded in these rooms. All the stories that had been written within these walls. "This is our place, Mom," I said quietly. "I hope you like it." My phone buzzed. Mark again. I'd been ignoring his calls for days, letting them go to voicemail. I'd told him I needed space, that I'd contact him when I was ready to talk. But he wasn't listening. He'd been calling every few hours, his messages growing more frantic and pleading with each passing day. I let the call go to voicemail and set the phone face down on the floor. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. The next morning, I went to the bank. I'd been living on cash since I left, not wanting to touch the money in my account until I had a clear plan. But now I needed to figure out how to make it work for me. I needed to talk to a financial advisor, someone who could help me invest it wisely, make it grow. I wasn't going to be one of those people who won the lottery and lost it all in a year. I was going to be smart. I was going to build something lasting. The bank manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, ushered me into his office with a deference that made me uncomfortable. He'd obviously seen the balance in my account and was eager to be helpful. He recommended a financial advisor, a woman named Sarah Klein, and offered to set up an appointment for me that very afternoon that I met Sarah at her office, a sleek, modern space in the financial district. She was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that I immediately appreciated. She looked at my financial situation, asked a few pointed questions, and laid out a plan that made my head spin. "You've got a unique opportunity here," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Most people who come into this kind of money do one of two things. They either spend it all on stupid stuff, or they lock it away and never touch it. Neither is a good strategy. The key is to make it work for you, to invest it in things that will grow over time and provide you with a steady income." What kind of investments are we talking about? Everything from mutual funds to real estate. You could buy a property, something commercial, and rent it out. Or you could start a business. Something you're passionate about. She paused, studying my face. "What do you love, Amy?" The question caught me off guard. What did I love? I'd spent so long trying to fit into Mark's world, trying to make myself small and palatable, that I'd forgotten to ask myself what I actually wanted. But then I remembered. The late nights in the kitchen, baking with my mother. The way she'd always said I had a gift for it. The way she'd dreamed of opening a little bakery someday, a place where people could come and feel loved. "I want to open a bakery," I said. "A small one. Something with character. Something my mother would have loved." Sarah smiled. "That sounds perfect. Let's figure out how to make it happen." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I met with real estate agents, scouting locations for the bakery. I met with contractors, talking about renovations and equipment. I met with lawyers, setting up the legal structure for the business. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying, all at once Mark kept calling. He left voicemails that ranged from desperate apologies to angry accusations. He wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, why I wasn't responding to his messages. He said he missed me, that he loved me, that he was willing to do whatever it took to get me back. But he also said I was being unreasonable, that I was throwing away our marriage over something that could be fixed, that I was making a huge mistake. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I thought about him, I felt a familiar ache in my chest, a mix of love and anger and disappointment that made it hard to breathe. But I also felt something else, a growing sense of relief, of freedom, of finally being able to breathe without the weight of his expectations crushing me. Eleanor called too. That was more surprising. She'd never called me before, never reached out for anything other than a passive-aggressive comment at a family dinner. But now she was calling, leaving voicemails that alternated between saccharine sweetness and barely veiled threats. "Amy, darling, we really need to talk," she'd coo in one message. "I think there's been a misunderstanding between us. I'm sure we can work this out like adults." Then, in the next message, "You think you can just walk away from this family, you think you can take what isn't yours and disappear. You're making a huge mistake, Amy. I hope you realize that before it's too late." I deleted her messages without listening to them all the way through. I didn't have the energy for her games. I had more important things to focus on. Chloe, surprisingly, was the one who kept her distance. She sent me one text, a simple message that read, "I'm sorry about everything. I hope you're okay." I responded with a brief thank you, and that was the end of it. I didn't know if it was genuine or just another tactic, but I didn't have the energy to analyze it. By the end of the first month, I'd found the perfect location for the bakery. It was a small storefront on a quiet downtown street, nestled between an antique shop and a used bookstore. It had a large window that let in plenty of natural light and a tiny kitchen in the back that would need a complete renovation. The rent was reasonable, the location was prime, and I fell in love with it the moment I walked through the door. I signed the lease the next day. A 5-year lease, with an option to renew. I hired a contractor to start the renovation work, picked out paint colors and fixtures and kitchen equipment. I named the bakery after my mother. Dottiesed the day the sign went up, I stood across the street and watched the workers install it. The letters were painted in a soft, warm cream against a background of sage green. It was beautiful, simple and elegant, and exactly what my mother would have wanted. "Mom," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I did it. I'm doing it. I hope you're proud of me." That night, I went back to my apartment and cooked myself a proper dinner for the first time in weeks. I sat at the small table in the corner of the kitchen, eating pasta and sipping wine, thinking about how far I'd come. A month ago, I'd been trapped in a marriage that was slowly suffocating me, surrounded by people who made me feel small and worthless. Now I had my own place, my own business, my own future. The phone rang. I checked the caller ID.
Mark.
I let it go to voicemail as I always did. But this time, I listened to the message. "Amy, I know you're avoiding me. I know you don't want to talk. But I need you to know something." His voice was raw, ragged. "My mother is dying. She collapsed last night. They found a tumor in her brain. It's not good, Amy. It's really not good." I set the phone down, my heart pounding. Eleanor.
Dying.
It seemed impossible. The woman was indestructible, a force of nature that nothing could stop. But now she was in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. "I know you hate her," Mark continued, his voice cracking. "I know she was terrible to you. But she's my mother, and I don't have anyone else. I need you, Amy. I need you to come home. Please." The message ended. I sat there in the silence, staring at the phone, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Eleanor.
Dying.
The woman who had made my life a living hell for 3 years. The woman who had mocked my mother, belittled my job, made me feel like I was worthless. She was dying, and Mark was asking me to come back, that I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was sad. But most of me was angry. Angry that he was using his mother's illness as a weapon to pull me back in. Angry that he couldn't see how much damage she'd done, how much damage they'd both done. But I was also compassionate. I couldn't help it. It was who I was. I'd spent my whole life caring for others, putting their needs before my own. It was why I'd become a nurse in the first place. And now, even after everything, that part of me was still there. Still urging me to help, to heal, to make things better. That I picked up the phone and called him back. Mark. Amy. His voice was thick with relief. Thank God. Thank you for calling. I didn't know what to do. I'm at the hospital. She's in ICU, they said. I'm not coming back, Mark, I said, cutting him off. I can't. I'm sorry about your mother. I truly am, but I can't come back to that life. I can't go back to that world. Amy, please. I don't have anyone else. Chloe is a wreck. She can't handle this. I need you. We need you. No, Mark. My voice was steady, firm. You don't need me. You've never needed me. You've needed someone to hold the space while you dealt with your mother's drama. You've needed someone to absorb the hits so you didn't have to. But that's not a marriage. That's not a partnership. Amy, I can't save your mother, Mark. That's not my job. And I can't save you either. That's not my job either. You have to figure out how to save yourself. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could hear the weight of his despair. Part of me wanted to cave, wanted to run back to him and make everything better. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I don't hate your mother, I said softly. I don't hate anyone.
But I can't come back to that life.
It was destroying me. And I'm finally starting to rebuild. I can't let you tear that down again. Amy, I love you.
No, Mark.
You love the idea of me. The idea of a wife who would make everything okay. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm someone else now. Someone who can stand on her own. Someone who doesn't need to be saved. I hung up before he could respond. The silence in the apartment was deafening, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was peaceful. It was healing. I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up my mother's photo. She was smiling at me, her tired eyes full of love and pride. I think I'm finally figuring it out, Mom, I said. I think I'm finally becoming the person you always knew I could be. The phone didn't ring again that night. And for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully, dreaming of a future that was entirely my own. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and despair. I stood in the doorway of Eleanor's room, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my coat, watching the machines beep and whir in their mechanical rhythm. She looked smaller than I remembered.
Frail.
The sharp angles of her face had softened, her skin pale against the white hospital pillow. The woman who had once made me feel like I was nothing was now just another patient in a bed, fighting for her life. I didn't want to be here. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to walk back out the door and never look back. But Sarah, my financial advisor, had convinced me otherwise. It's not about her, she'd said. It's about you. About being the kind of person you can be proud of when you look in the mirror. Don't let her sickness become an excuse to become someone you're not.
So di come.
I'd driven to the hospital, signed in at the front desk, and taken the elevator up to the ICU floor. Mark had been waiting for me, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled from days of sleeping in the waiting room. He'd hugged me when I arrived, holding on like I was a life raft in a storm. I let him, but I didn't hug him back. I couldn't. Thank you, he'd whispered. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then I'd walked into Eleanor's room, and now I was standing here, staring at the woman who had made my life a living hell for 3 years, and I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked confused, disoriented. Then her gaze focused on me, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or anger. It was hard to tell. Amy, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? I came to see you, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Mark asked me to. She laughed, a dry, rasping sound that turned into a cough.
Mark.
Always so dramatic. She shifted in the bed, wincing at the movement. He thinks I'm going to die. He's always been such a worrywart. Are you? The question came out harsher than I'd intended. Going to die, I mean. Eleanor stared at me for a long moment. The doctors say I have a few months, maybe less. She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window. They found a tumor in my brain. Inoperable. They're giving me radiation, but it's just to buy time. They're not trying to save me. They're just trying to make me comfortable.
I didn't know what to say to that.
I'd spent years wishing she'd just leave me alone. But I'd never wished for this.
I didn't want her to die.
I just wanted her to stop hurting me. I'm sorry, I said. The words felt hollow, inadequate. But they were all I had. Are you? Eleanor turned her head back to look at me. I wouldn't blame you if you weren't. I know what I did.
What I said.
I wasn't kind to you, Amy. I was cruel. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I'd never heard her admit to being anything other than perfect. It was unsettling. Mark told me about the money, she continued. Your mother's inheritance. He said it was millions. That's why you left. Isn't it? You finally had the means to escape. That's not why I left, I said, my voice sharp. I left because I couldn't take it anymore.
The jokes.
The insults. The constant, never-ending feeling that I wasn't good enough. The money didn't give me the courage to leave. It gave me the ability to survive once I did. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, my mother was like me, cruel, demanding. She never approved of anyone I brought home. My first husband, he was a musician. She called him a failure, a wastrel, a man who would never amount to anything. She was right. He left me for a younger woman and took everything I had. She paused, her gaze distant. I swore I would never be like her. I swore I would be different. But then I had children of my own, and I heard myself saying the same things. And I couldn't stop. It was like I was channeling her. Like I had no control over it.
Stunned.
She'd never talked about her past before. Never mentioned her mother or her first husband. I didn't even know she'd been married before Mark's father. I wasn't always like this, Eleanor continued. There was a time when I was kind. Genuinely kind. But life has a way of hardening you, doesn't it? Of turning you into something you never wanted to be. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? I asked. Because it doesn't. I'm sorry you had a difficult childhood. I'm sorry your mother was cruel. But that doesn't excuse what you did to me. What you said about my mother. She was a good person, Eleanor. She worked hard. She loved me. She sacrificed everything for me. And you made her sound like a failure. I was jealous, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of your mother. Of the love you had for her. Of the way she'd given you everything without ever asking for anything in return. I'd never had that. I'd never known what that felt like. And when I saw it in you, it made me angry. Angry and bitter and resentful. So I tore you down. Because it was easier than facing the truth about myself. I sat down in the chair next to her bed, my legs suddenly weak. I didn't know what to do with all of this. The woman I'd hated for years was lying in front of me, vulnerable and dying, telling me things I'd never expected to hear. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Maybe you'll never be ready, Eleanor said. And that's okay. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. Understand what I did. Understand why it was wrong. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched my arm. I know it's too late. I know I can't undo the hurt I caused. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every cruel word, every bitter joke, every time I made you feel small. I didn't pull away from her touch. I sat there, frozen, letting her hand rest on my arm. It was strange. The woman who had been my tormentor was now asking for my absolution, and I didn't know whether to give it or to walk away. Mark told me about the bakery, Eleanor said, changing the subject. Dottie's. He said you're naming it after your mother. That's lovely, Amy. Truly lovely. Thank you, I said, my voice hoarse. I always wanted to open a shop, she continued. A little boutique. Something with beautiful clothes and accessories. My mother told me I wasn't smart enough, not pretty enough, not good enough. So I gave up on it. I married Mark's father and became a housewife. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. People don't have to be what their parents expected, I said. You could have done anything. You still could have, even after you got married. I know that now. Eleanor's eyes welled with tears. I know it, but I was so afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of proving her right. And that fear made me bitter. Made me cruel. Made me take it out on everyone around me, especially you. I watched her cry, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something like understanding. A recognition that she was just as broken as I'd been. Just as trapped. Just as desperate to be seen and loved. I should go, I said, standing up. I have work to do. The bakery is opening soon. Of course. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I understand. Thank you for coming, Amy. It means more than you know. I walked to the door, then paused. Eleanor, yes, I'll come back. Tomorrow, if you want. She stared at me, her expression unreadable. I would like that. I would like that very much. I left the room without looking back. Mark was waiting in the hallway, his face pale with worry. How did it go? He asked. What did she say? She apologized. I said. She told me about her mother. About her first husband. She said she was sorry. Mark blinked, clearly taken aback. She actually said that she did. I paused, studying his face. Did you know about her mother, about how she treated her? Mark shook his head.
No.
She never talked about her parents. I don't think my father knew either. She kept it all locked away. I nodded slowly. I think a lot of us do. Keep things locked away. I looked down at my hands, my mother's ring still on my finger. I've been so angry for so long. At her, at you, at all of it. But I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to be bitter and resentful. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. To move on. Not to go back to the way things were, but to find a way forward. A way that doesn't involve hating anyone. Mark reached out, taking my hand. His touch was warm, familiar, and I let him hold on for a moment. I love you, Amy. I know I haven't always shown it, but I do. I know, I said. But that's not enough. It's never been enough. I pulled my hand away and walked toward the elevator. Mark called after me, but I didn't stop. I had a bakery to open, a life to build, and I couldn't let the past, or the people in it, hold me back anymore. The elevator doors closed, and I was alone again. But this time, the loneliness didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a gift, a chance to start over, to become someone new. Someone my mother would have been proud of. When I got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat and looked up at the hospital building. Somewhere up there, Eleanor was lying in a bed, facing her own mortality, trying to make peace with the life she'd lived. And I had to make peace too. With her. With Mark. With myself. I started the car and drove away, heading toward the bakery. Dottie's was almost ready. The renovation was nearly complete, the equipment was installed, and the sign was up. All that was left was the grand opening. I'd set the date for next week, and I'd been working nonstop to make sure everything was perfect. When I walked through the door of the bakery, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The space was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable seating. The display cases were empty, but I could already imagine them filled with pastries and breads, cakes and cookies. I could imagine the smell of fresh baking filling the air. I could imagine my mother standing behind the counter, smiling at the customers, living her dream. I'm doing it, Mom, I said to the empty room. I'm doing it for both of us. The next few days were a blur of activity. I hired a small staff, trained them on the equipment, and finalized the menu. I ordered ingredients, designed the displays, and prepared for the grand opening. Mark called a few times, but I let the calls go to voicemail. I didn't have time to get pulled back into his drama. But on the day before the grand opening, something happened that I never expected. Eleanor called. Not Mark. Eleanor herself. Amy, she said, her voice still weak but stronger than it had been in the hospital. I know it's last minute, and I know you're busy, but I was wondering if you could come by the hospital tomorrow. I have something I want to give you. What is it? I asked. Where? I'd rather show you.
Can you come please? I hesitated.
I didn't want to get pulled back into her orbit, but something in her voice made me pause. She sounded desperate, vulnerable. For the first time since I'd met her, she sounded like she needed me. I'll come, I said. But I can't stay long. I have the grand opening in the afternoon. I understand.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you.
I hung up, my heart racing. I didn't know what she wanted, but I was about to find out that the hospital room was different this time. The machines were quieter, the beeping less frantic. Eleanor was sitting up in bed, propped against a mountain of pillows, her hair brushed and her face lightly made up. She looked almost like her old self, except for the pallor of her skin and the thinness of her hands. There was a small box on the bedside table, wrapped in cream-colored paper with a silver ribbon. It sat there like a question mark, waiting for me to answer. "Sit down, Amy," Eleanor said, gesturing to the chair beside her bed.
Please.
"I won't keep you long." I sat, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes fixed on the box. "What is this about you said you had something to give me?"
Ido.
She reached for the box, her movements slow and deliberate. "But first, I want to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." I waited, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to expect. Another apology, more confessions about her difficult past, whatever it was. I wasn't prepared for what came next. "When you came to see me the other day," Eleanor began, "I told you that I understood what I'd done, that I understood why it was wrong. But I didn't tell you the whole truth." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "The truth is, I knew exactly what I was doing. Every time I made a joke about your mother, every time I made you feel small, every time I tore you down, I knew exactly what I was doing. And I did it anyway." I felt the air leave my lungs. Why would you do that?" "Because I was angry." Eleanor's voice was quiet, but steady. "Angry at you for being everything I wasn't. Angry at you for having a mother who loved you unconditionally, who sacrificed everything for you, who never made you feel like you weren't enough. I was jealous, Amy. Jealous of the life you had, the life your mother gave you. And I wanted to destroy it." I stared at her, my mind reeling. This wasn't just an apology. This was a confession. A confession of malice, of intentional cruelty, of a calculated campaign to break me down. "I didn't just want you to leave Mark," she continued. "I wanted you to leave him broken. I wanted you to feel worthless, like you could never be good enough for anyone. Because that's how I felt. That's how my mother made me feel. And I couldn't stand the thought of anyone else being happy when I was so miserable." "You're telling me all of this now," I said, my voice shaking. "After everything. After all the damage you've done." "Why, because I'm dying, Amy. And I want to die with a clear conscience." She picked up the box, holding it out to me. "I can't undo the past. I can't take back the things I said, or the things I did. But I can give you this." I took the box, my hands trembling. "What is it?" "Open it." I pulled the ribbon loose and tore off the paper. Inside was a small, velvet jewelry box. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a ring. A simple, elegant ring with a single, flawless diamond set in platinum. It was beautiful. It was also worth a fortune. "This was my mother's ring," Eleanor said. "The only thing she ever gave me that was worth anything. I've held on to it for 50 years. I was going to give it to Chloe, but she doesn't want it. She said it's too old-fashioned, too heavy. She's never understood the value of things that last." I looked from the ring to Eleanor, my confusion mounting. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're the only one who deserves it." Eleanor's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You've been through so much, Amy. And you've come out stronger. You're building a life for yourself, a life your mother would be proud of. I can't think of anyone more deserving of this ring than you." I shook my head, trying to process what I was hearing. "Eleanor, I don't understand. You spent years trying to destroy me. And now you're giving me a family heirloom." "I'm not giving it to you as a gift," Eleanor said. "I'm giving it to you as an apology. A real apology. I know it's not enough. I know I can never make up for what I did. But this ring is the only thing I have that's worth anything, and I want you to have it. I want you to remember that even people who seem irredeemable can sometimes find their way back. I stared at the ring, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to throw it back at her, to tell her that no piece of jewelry could undo the damage she'd caused. But another part of me, the part that had been raised by a mother who believed in forgiveness and second chances, hesitated. Eleanor, I finally said, I don't know if I can accept this.
Take it anyway, she said.
If you don't want it, you can sell it. Use the money for your bakery. Or give it to someone else. I don't care what you do with it. I just want to give it to you. I sat there, the box in my hands, the weight of her confession pressing down on me. I'd come here expecting another round of manipulation, another attempt to pull me back into her orbit. Instead, I'd gotten a confession, a gift, a plea for forgiveness. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. I don't know if I'll ever be able to. I know, Eleanor said. And I don't expect you to, but I had to try. I had to at least try to make things right. I stood up, the box still in my hands. I should go. I have the grand opening tomorrow. Of course. Eleanor smiled, a sad, wistful smile. Good luck with the bakery, Amy. I'll be thinking of you. I walked to the door, then paused. Eleanor, yes, if you want after the grand opening, I could bring you some pastries. Maybe some of my mother's recipes. If you're interested. Eleanor's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Gratitude. The faintest flicker of hope. I would like that, Amy. I would like that very much. I nodded and walked out of the room, the velvet box clutched in my hand. Mark was in the hallway, waiting. He saw the box and raised an eyebrow. What's that? Your mother gave it to me. It was her mother's ring. Mark's jaw dropped. She gave you the ring, the one she's been holding onto for 50 years, she did. I shrugged. She said she wanted to give it to someone who deserved it. Mark shook his head slowly. I don't know what to say. I never thought she'd do something like that. Neither did I. I looked at the box, then at Mark. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But I know I'm not going to sell it. Why not? It's probably worth a fortune. Because that's not what my mother would have wanted. I tucked the box into my coat pocket. She would have wanted me to find a way to make peace. To move forward. And that's what I'm going to do. I walked toward the elevator, Mark falling into step beside me. Amy, wait.
Can we talk?
Just for a minute, I stopped, turning to face him. What do you want to talk about, us? He ran a hand through his hair, looking more lost than I'd ever seen him. I know I messed up. I know I let my mother come between us. But I love you, Amy. I've always loved you. And I don't want to lose you forever. Mark, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not the same person I was when we were married. I've changed. I've grown. I'm building a life for myself. A life I can be proud of. I know. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. And that's why I love you even more. You're strong, Amy. You're independent. You're everything I always wanted to be. And I know I don't deserve you. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking anyway. Can we try again? I looked at him, at the man I'd once promised to spend my life with. He was handsome, charming, and deeply flawed. He'd let his mother destroy our marriage, had stood by while she tore me apart. But he was also trying. He was reaching out, asking for help, asking for a chance to be better. I don't know, I finally said. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. Then let's not go back. He took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. Let's start over.
Fresh. No expectations, no assumptions.
Just two people trying to figure out if there's something worth saving. I pulled my hand away, but gently. I need time, Mark. I need to figure out who I am before I can figure out who I want to be with. I understand. He nodded, a look of resignation on his face. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting. I walked toward the elevator, and this time, I didn't look back. The doors slid closed, and I was alone again. But this time, the loneliness didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a choice I'd made for myself, a choice that was leading me toward something better. The next morning, I woke up early, long before the sun had risen. I dressed carefully, put on a comfortable pair of shoes, and drove to the bakery. Dottie's was waiting for me, dark and quiet, ready to come to life. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space was perfect. The display cases were gleaming, the tables were set, the kitchen was stocked with ingredients. All I needed to do was light the ovens and start baking. I walked to the kitchen, tied on my apron, and took a deep breath. "This is for you, Mom," I said. "For both of us." The first batch of croissants went into the oven, and the smell of butter and flour filled the air. I worked quickly, efficiently, moving through the recipes my mother had taught me decades ago. Chocolate croissants, cinnamon rolls, blueberry muffins, and a special batch of scones that had been her signature. By the time the sun was fully up, the bakery was ready. The display cases were filled, the coffee was brewing, and the music was playing softly in the background. I stood by the door, my heart pounding, waiting for the first customers to arrive. The clock struck 9, and I unlocked the door. The first person through was an elderly woman I didn't recognize, but she smiled at me warmly and ordered a croissant and a cup of coffee. Then came a young couple, then a group of college students, then a family with 2 small children. Within an hour, the bakery was full. People were chatting, laughing, enjoying the food and the atmosphere. I moved through the crowd, refilling coffee cups and answering questions about the menu. It was chaotic, exhausting, and absolutely wonderful. At noon, I took a break and stepped outside for some fresh air. I was leaning against the wall, catching my breath, when I saw a familiar car pull up across the street. Mark got out, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a small gift bag. He walked toward me, a nervous smile on his face. "Congratulations," he said, holding out the flowers. "I heard the grand opening was a success." "It was," I said, taking the flowers. "Thank you. Can I come in? I'd love to see the place." I hesitated. The bakery was full of customers, and I wasn't sure I wanted him there. But then I looked at his face, at the hope in his eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. "Sure," I said. "Come on in." He followed me inside, and I watched him take in the space. The exposed brick wall, the reclaimed wood tables, the vintage light fixtures. His eyes were wide, his expression one of genuine awe. "Amy, this is incredible," he said. "You did all of this yourself, with a lot of help from contractors and designers," I said. "But yes, it was my vision. My mother's vision. It's perfect." He turned to look at me, his eyes shining. "I'm so proud of you." I smiled, a small, tentative smile. "Thank you, Mark. That means a lot." He handed me the gift bag. "This is for you. A small something to celebrate." I opened it, and inside was a small silver picture frame. The photo inside was of me and my mother, taken at the diner where she used to work. I was maybe 10 years old, standing behind the counter, wearing a paper hat and grinning from ear to ear. My mother was beside me, her arm around my shoulders, laughing at something the photographer had said. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice catching. "In your old stuff," he said. "I found it in a box in the closet. I thought you'd want to have it. To remember the good times." I held the frame to my chest, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you so much." Mark reached out and wiped a tear from my cheek. "I know things are complicated," he said, "but I want you to know that I'm here. No matter what you decide, I'm here." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then I turned back to the bakery, to my customers, to my new life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay, that the bakery was thriving. 3 months had passed since the grand opening, and Dottie's had become a local institution. The regulars came every morning for their coffee and croissants. The college students camped out at the communal table for hours, nursing their lattes and tapping away at their laptops. The afternoon rush brought mothers with strollers, retirees with newspapers, and the occasional businessman looking for a quiet place to take a call. I loved every minute of it. The early mornings, the flour-dusted counters, the smell of fresh bread wafting through the air. It was exhausting work, but it was the kind of exhaustion that felt good. The kind that left you satisfied at the end of the day, knowing you'd built something real, but not everything was perfect. Eleanor had taken a turn for the worse. The radiation had stopped working, and the doctors had moved her to hospice care. She was fading quickly, her body giving out even as her mind remained sharp and clear. I visited her every few days, bringing pastries from the bakery and sitting with her while she ate. She was always grateful, always gracious, a stark contrast to the woman she'd been before. It was like watching someone transform before my eyes, shedding the armor of cruelty she'd worn for so long and revealing the vulnerable person beneath. "Amy," she said one afternoon, her voice thin and reedy. "I want to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about." I leaned closer, my heart tightening. "What is it?" "Your mother." Eleanor paused, her eyes drifting toward the window. "I was so jealous of her, of the way she loved you, of the way you loved her. I never had that. I never knew what it felt like to be loved unconditionally." I took her hand, squeezing gently. "I know. You told me. But I also wanted you to know that I see it now." She turned her gaze back to me, her eyes bright with tears. "I see what she gave you. The strength, the resilience, the ability to forgive even when forgiveness isn't deserved. She raised a remarkable woman, Amy. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it." I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my throat, thick and heavy. So I just held her hand and let her talk. "I'm not afraid of dying," she continued. "I'm afraid of being forgotten, of leaving this world without leaving anything behind. But I think I've done something good. By giving you that ring, by making peace with you. I think that matters." "It does," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It matters a lot." Eleanor died 3 days later. Mark called me early in the morning, his voice raw and broken. "She's gone," he said. "She passed in her sleep. The nurses said it was peaceful." I drove to the hospital, my heart heavy with grief. Not for Eleanor, not exactly, but for the person she'd become in her final months. The person she might have been all along, if only she'd had the courage to let herself be vulnerable. Mark was in the waiting room, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He stood when I walked in, and I wrapped my arms around him, holding him while he sobbed. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The funeral was small, just family and a few close friends. Chloe was there, looking subdued in a black dress, her fiancé hovering at her side. She hugged me when I arrived, a brief, awkward embrace that said more than words could. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know things were complicated, but I'm glad you were there for her at the end." "Me too," I said. "She changed, Chloe. She really changed." Chloe nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I know. She called me a few weeks ago. She apologized for everything. For being so controlling, for putting so much pressure on me. She said she just wanted me to be happy. And then she told me she loved me." She wiped her eyes, shaking her head. I never thought I'd hear her say that. The service was beautiful. The eulogy was delivered by an old friend of Eleanor's, a woman who'd known her since childhood. She talked about Eleanor's kindness, her generosity, her fierce love for her family. It was a version of Eleanor I'd never known, and I found myself wishing I'd had the chance to meet her. After the funeral, Mark and I walked to the cemetery together. The day was cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds. We stood in front of the grave, watching the workers lower the casket into the ground. "She was a good person," Mark said. "Deep down, she was a good person." "I know," I said. "It took me a long time to see it, but I know." Mark reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Can we try again, Amy? Not right away, but eventually, when you're ready." I looked at him, at the man who had been my husband, my partner, my tormentor. He was different now. Softer. More vulnerable. The death of his mother had cracked something open inside him, revealing a person I'd only glimpsed before. "I don't know," I said. "I'm still figuring out who I am, what I want. I can't promise anything." "That's okay." He squeezed my hand. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to show you that I've changed, that I can be the man you deserve." I didn't answer. I just stood there, holding his hand, watching the casket disappear into the ground. The weight of the past was heavy on my shoulders, but so was the possibility of the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The weeks after Eleanor's death were quiet. The bakery kept me busy, and Mark kept his distance, giving me the space I'd asked for. He called occasionally just to check in, but he didn't push. He didn't demand. He just waited. I started spending more time at the cemetery, visiting Eleanor's grave and my mother's grave, which was in the same cemetery, just a few rows over. I would bring flowers and sit for a while, thinking about the two women who had shaped my life in such different ways. One afternoon, I was sitting at my mother's grave, a bouquet of wildflowers in my hand, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting Mark or Chloe. But it was a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her late 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes, and she was holding a small, worn photograph. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tentative. "Are you Amy Carter?" I stood up, brushing the dirt from my pants.
Yes.
"Can I help you?" She smiled, a warm, sad smile. "I'm Margaret, your mother's sister." I stared at her, my mind reeling. My mother's sister. I didn't even know my mother had a sister. She'd never talked about her family, never mentioned any siblings. "I don't understand," I said. "My mother never told me she had a sister." "I know." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We had a falling out years ago, before you were born. I tried to reach out, but she wouldn't have it. She was stubborn. Your mother didn't trust anyone."
I didn't know what to say.
I'd spent my whole life thinking my mother was alone, that I was all she had. And now this woman was standing in front of me, claiming to be her sister. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because I heard about the bakery," Margaret said. "Dottie's. I knew it had to be you. She always talked about opening a bakery. It was her dream." She held out the photograph. "I found this in an old box. I thought you might want to have it." I took the photograph, my hands trembling. It was a picture of two young women, maybe 18 or 19, standing in front of a small house. They were laughing, their arms wrapped around each other. I recognized my mother immediately, and I knew, without being told, that the other woman was Margaret. "She talked about you all the time," I said, my voice cracking. "She never said your name. She never said she had a sister. But she talked about you." Margaret's tears spilled over. "I was so young when we fought. So stupid. I said things I didn't mean, things I could never take back. She cut me off and I let her. I was too proud to apologize. And then she died, and I lost my chance." I looked at the photograph, then at Margaret. The anger I'd expected to feel was absent. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. My mother hadn't been alone. She'd had a sister, a family, a past I didn't know about. "She never told me," I said. "She never told me anything about her family. I always thought she was alone." "She was," Margaret said. "But she didn't have to be. I should have tried harder. I should have been there for her. I should have been there for you." I reached out and took Margaret's hand. "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." We stood there, two strangers bound by blood and loss, holding hands in a cemetery. And for the first time, I felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. My mother had been more than just a single parent. She'd been a sister, a daughter, a woman with a story I'd never known. "I'd like to know more," I said. "About your family. About my mother's family. If you're willing to share." Margaret smiled through her tears. "I'd like that. I'd like that very much." We walked to a nearby bench and sat down. Margaret started talking, telling me about my mother's childhood, about their parents, about the farm they'd grown up on. She told me about my grandfather, the one who'd left the trust fund, the one my mother had never talked about. She told me about the fight that had torn them apart, a stupid argument over a boy that had spiraled into years of silence. "She was so proud of you," Margaret said. "She wrote to me once, years ago, after you were born. She said she'd never known love like that. She said you were the best thing that had ever happened to her." I cried then, the tears I'd been holding back for months finally spilling over. Margaret held me, her arms warm and strong, and I let myself be held, I'm glad you came, I said. I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm glad too, Margaret said. And I'm sorry it took so long. We stayed at the cemetery for hours, talking and crying and laughing. When the sun began to set, we exchanged numbers and promised to meet again. I want to tell you everything, Margaret said. Every story, every memory. I want you to know who your mother was, who you came from. I want that too, I said. I want to know everything. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of the past was still there, but it was no longer a burden. It was a foundation, a story, a legacy, and I was ready to build on it. The door of the bakery swung open at 7:13 on a Tuesday morning. I was behind the counter, pulling a tray of cinnamon rolls from the oven, when I heard the familiar, sharp click of heels on hardwood. I looked up, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Chloe stood in the doorway, her designer handbag clutched to her chest, her face a mask of barely concealed fury. Behind her, the morning sun cast long shadows across the street, and I could see a man waiting in a black sedan, engine running, watching the scene unfold. "Get out," Chloe said. Her voice was cold, clipped, nothing like the subdued woman I'd hugged at her mother's funeral. I set down the tray, wiping my hands on my apron. "Good morning to you too, Chloe. Can I get you something coffee?" "A pastry," I said. "Get out." She stepped forward, her heels echoing against the floor. The few customers in the bakery turned to stare, their conversations dying mid-sentence. "I don't want your coffee. I don't want your pastries. I want you out of my family's life. For good." I took a slow, steadying breath. "Chloe, I don't know what this is about, but I think we should talk privately. This isn't the place. Stop pretending you care about privacy." She laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. "You've never cared about privacy. You've always been the victim, haven't you? The poor little nurse from the wrong side of the tracks, married into a family that never appreciated her. You've milked that story for everything it's worth." I felt the heat rising to my cheeks. "I don't know what you think you know. I know everything." Chloe pulled a folded document from her purse and slapped it on the counter. "I know about the money. The $3.4 million your mother left you. I know about the trust fund, the bakery, all of it. And I know what you did with it." I picked up the document, scanning it quickly. It was a copy of a letter from my bank detailing the disbursement of the trust funds. The same letter I'd received months ago. How she gotten a copy, I had no idea. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Does it matter? What matters is that you took money that should have gone to us. To your family. To the people who took you in when you had nothing." "Excuse me." I set the letter down, my hands shaking. "The people who took me and the people who spent 3 years telling me I wasn't good enough. The people who made my life a living hell. You're twisting things." Chloe's voice rose, her control slipping. "My mother was difficult, I know that. But she loved you, in her own way. She gave you that ring, didn't she, the family heirloom? The one that was supposed to go to me." "You told her you didn't want it," I said. "You said it was too old-fashioned, too heavy." That was before I knew what it was worth. Chloe crossed her arms, her eyes blazing. "That ring is worth over $100,000. And you just took it. You took it, and you didn't even have the decency to ask." I felt the air leave my lungs. This wasn't about grief or family. It wasn't even about the ring. It was about the money. The money I'd inherited, the money Chloe felt entitled to, the money she'd been counting on for her wedding, her future, her life. "Chloe," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. "I understand you're upset. I understand that losing your mother is devastating. But you can't walk into my place of business and make accusations like this. Watch me." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You think you can just walk away from us? You think you can take what's ours and live happily ever after in your cute little bakery? You're wrong. I will make your life a living hell, Amy. I will make sure everyone in this town knows what you did." The customers were staring openly now. I could see a woman in the corner pulling out her phone, probably to record the scene. My face was burning with humiliation, but I refused to let her see me break. "Chloe," I said, "I'm going to ask you one more time to leave. If you don't, I'm going to have to call the police. Call them.
Chloe laughed.
Call them and tell them that your sister-in-law is upset about a family heirloom, that you're a thief and a liar and I never heard the rest of the sentence. The door to the back kitchen burst open, and Mark strode through, his face white with fury. Chloe, what the hell do you think you're doing? He grabbed her arm, spinning her to face him. You've got no right to come here and harass Amy. No right at all. Get off me. Chloe yanked her arm free. You're defending her. After everything she's done, after she stole from our family, she didn't steal anything. Mark's voice was low, dangerous. Mom gave her that ring, and the money was Amy's to begin with. It was her mother's inheritance, not ours. We never had any claim to it. Then why didn't she tell us? Chloe's voice cracked, the anger giving way to something more fragile. Why didn't she tell us how much it was? Why did she keep it a secret? Because she knew you would do this. Mark gestured around the bakery, at the stunned customers, at the chaos she'd created. She knew you'd come here and make a scene. She knew you'd try to take it from her. And you know what? You're proving her right. Chloe's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw the real person underneath, the grieving daughter who'd lost her mother, the spoiled woman who'd been forced to confront the limits of her privilege. She looked lost, broken, completely undone. I just wanted to matter, she whispered. To someone. To anyone. Mom never really loved me. She loved Mark, always Mark. I was just there. The decoration. The pretty daughter, who was supposed to marry well and make her proud. But she never saw me. Not really. I felt a pang of something unexpected. Empathy. I knew what it was like to be overlooked, to be seen as nothing more than a role, a function, a piece of someone else's story. Chloe, I said, stepping around the counter. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry you felt that way.
I'm sorry your mother made you feel invisible. But that doesn't excuse what you did here today. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't know who else to blame. It was easier to be angry at you than to be angry at her, to be angry at the world. I know. I reached out, touching her arm gently. And I understand. But you can't keep doing this. You can't keep lashing out at people who don't deserve it. It's not going to make things better. It's only going to make you more alone. Chloe started to cry, her sobs echoing in the silent bakery. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her while she fell apart. Mark stood nearby, watching, his expression a mixture of grief and relief. After a long moment, Chloe pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry for everything. For coming here. For saying those things. For trying to take the ring.
It wasn't right.
You don't have to apologize, I said. Just promise me you'll get help. Therapy. Counseling. Something. You need to process this, Chloe. You can't just hold it all in. She nodded, sniffling. I will. I promise. Mark stepped forward, pulling her into a hug. We're going to get through this, he said. The three of us. Together. I watched them, a strange feeling settling in my chest. A family, broken and healing, standing in the middle of my bakery. A family I'd never expected to have, in a way I'd never expected to find it. The days that followed were strange. Chloe started coming to the bakery regularly, sitting at the communal table and nursing a latte while she worked on her laptop. She was quieter now, more subdued, like someone who'd been through a war and was still processing the aftermath. That we talk sometimes. About her mother, about her childhood, about the pressure she'd felt to be perfect. She admitted that she'd resented me, not because of the money, but because I'd been able to escape. I'd walked away from the family's expectations, built my own life, and she'd been too afraid to do the same. I was jealous, she said one afternoon, staring into her coffee cup. You had the guts to leave. I never did. I just stayed, even though I knew I was miserable. You can still leave, I said. It's never too late. She looked up at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Is it that easy? Just walk away? No. I shook my head. It's not easy. It's terrifying. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But it's worth it. I promise you it's worth it. Chloe didn't answer. But the next week, I heard through Mark that she'd called off her engagement. The wedding, the fairy tale wedding her mother had planned, was over. I just couldn't do it, she told me later, her voice shaky but resolute. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life pretending. Pretending to be happy, pretending to be in love, pretending to be someone I'm not. I needed to be like you. I needed to be free. I smiled, a genuine smile. I'm proud of you, Chloe. That takes a lot of courage. She smiled back, a small, tentative smile that reminded me of who she'd been before the weight of her mother's expectations had crushed her. Maybe we can be friends, she said. Real friends. Not just family. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that a lot. Margaret came by the bakery a few days later, bringing a stack of old photo albums and a box of letters my mother had written but never sent. We spent the afternoon going through them, reading my mother's words, learning about the family I'd never known. She loved you so much, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion.
She talked about you all the time.
In the letters I never answered. In the cards I never returned. You were her whole world. I know, I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. I always knew. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the pieces of my mother's life. The photographs, the letters, the memories. I felt closer to her than I had in years, as if she was sitting right there beside me, watching me read her words. Thank you, Mom, I whispered.
For everything. For the money, yes.
But more than that, for the strength. For teaching me to be who I am. For never giving up on me.
I didn't hear a response.
But I felt something. A warmth, a presence, a love that transcended death. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that she was proud of me. That she'd always been proud of me. I closed the photo album and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. The city was quiet, peaceful, full of possibility. I had a family now, a real family, in ways I'd never expected. I had a business that was thriving. I had a future that was entirely my own. And I had a choice. A choice about what to do next. A choice about who to be. I picked up my phone and called Mark. Hi, he said, his voice warm and familiar. Hi, I said. I've been thinking about what you said, about trying again. And I think I'm ready. Not to go back to the way things were, but to move forward. To build something new. Together. I could hear the smile in his voice. That's all I'm asking for, Amy. A chance. A chance to be better. Then come over. Let's talk. Let's figure this out. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up, my heart pounding. The past was behind me, a long, difficult road that had led me to this moment. And the future was ahead, uncertain and full of possibility. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what was coming. I was ready. The courtroom was small and unremarkable, the kind of place where lives were dissected and reassembled on a daily basis. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded neatly in front of me, watching the judge shuffle through the final set of papers. Mark sat beside me, his leg bouncing with nervous energy, his hand resting on the table inches from mine. All right, the judge said, peering over his reading glasses. I have reviewed the final settlement agreement. Both parties have signed. Are there any objections? None, Your Honor, my lawyer said. None. Mark's lawyer echoed. The judge nodded, stamping the papers with a firm, final thud. Divorce granted. Case closed. And just like that, it was over. 4 years of marriage, 3 years of quiet suffering, and 1 year of chaos and transformation, all reduced to a few stamped documents and a single word. Granted. I stood up, my legs steady beneath me. Mark stood too, turning to face me. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, but there was a lightness in his expression that hadn't been there before. A kind of peace. I guess this is it, he said, his voice soft. I guess it is. I extended my hand. I hope you find what you're looking for, Mark. I really do. He took my hand, holding it for a moment longer than necessary. I already have. I'm looking at her. He let go, stepping back. But I know it's not the right time. Maybe it'll never be the right time. And that's okay. I just want you to be happy, Amy. I am happy, I said. For the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely happy. He nodded, a sad smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That's all I ever wanted, even if I didn't know how to give it to you. I watched him walk out of the courtroom, his shoulders straight, his steps measured. He didn't look back, and I was glad. I didn't want to see the pain in his eyes. I didn't want to carry that weight with me. The hallway outside the courtroom was bright and sterile, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant murmur of conversations. I stood there for a moment, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. I'm free, I whispered to myself. I'm finally free. I walked out of the courthouse and into the late afternoon sun. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from the nearby park. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with a clean, uncomplicated air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, smiling when I saw the name on the screen. Hey, Margaret, I said. It's done. It's over. Are you okay? She asked, her voice full of concern. Do you need me to come get you? I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm great. I laughed, a light, joyful sound. I'm going to the bakery. I need to see Dottie's. I need to feel something real. I'll meet you there, she said. I have something to show you. Margaret was waiting for me when I arrived, standing on the sidewalk in front of Dottie's with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, gray-haired, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Amy, Margaret said, her voice trembling slightly, there's someone I want you to meet. I looked at the man, my heart racing. There was something familiar about him. Something in the shape of his face, the way he held himself. A memory flickered at the edge of my consciousness, something my mother had said years ago, a half-forgotten story about a man she loved before she met my father. Who are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man stepped forward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. My name is Arthur, he said. Arthur Peterson. I'm your grandfather. The words hit me like a physical blow. My grandfather. The man who had set up the trust fund. The man my mother had never talked about. The man I'd assumed was dead. But you died, I said, shaking my head. My mother said you died before I was born. I know. Arthur's voice cracked. I know she said that. And I don't blame her. I was a coward. I was too proud to reach out. Too stubborn to admit I was wrong. By the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. She was gone, and I'd lost my chance. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the ghost I'd built in my mind. He wasn't what I'd expected. He was soft, vulnerable, full of regret. He was a man who'd made terrible mistakes and was desperate to atone for them. Why now? I asked. Why did you wait until now to find me? Because I didn't know you existed, he said. Your mother cut off all contact with me when she was pregnant. She was so angry, so hurt. She told me she never wanted to see me again, and she made good on that promise. She changed her name, moved away, started a new life. I spent years looking for her, but she'd covered her tracks well. Margaret stepped forward, taking my hand. I found him a few weeks ago, she said. After we met, I started digging. I wanted to know more about our family, about your mother's past. I found him through a private investigator. I pulled my hand away, stepping back. This is too much. This is all too much. I know. Arthur held up his hands, a gesture of surrender. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I just wanted to meet you.
To tell you that I'm sorry.
For everything. Sorry, I laughed. A bitter, broken sound. You left my mother alone. You abandoned her. She spent her whole life struggling, working double shifts at a diner, trying to raise me on her own. And you were out there with all that money, and you never once reached out to help her. I tried. Arthur's voice was thick with emotion. I tried so many times, but she wouldn't accept my help. She wouldn't even talk to me. She said she'd rather starve than take a penny from me. I shook my head, my mind racing. The trust fund, the money my mother had left me. It wasn't a gift. It was a guilt offering, a payment for decades of silence and neglect. Why are you here? I asked, my voice flat. What do you want from me? I want to know you, Arthur said. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've done nothing to earn your trust.
But I want to try.
I want to make up for lost time. I looked at him, at the tears streaming down his face, at the desperation in his eyes. He was an old man, broken and lonely, reaching out for a connection he'd spent a lifetime running away from. And despite everything, despite all the anger and resentment and pain, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something like understanding. A recognition that he was just as lost as I'd been. I don't know if I can do this, I said. I don't know if I can just accept you into my life like nothing happened.
I know, he said.
And I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to prove myself. I looked at Margaret, then back at Arthur. The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows across the street. Dottie stood behind me, warm and inviting, a testament to everything my mother had sacrificed. Come inside, I said, my voice soft. I'll make you some coffee, and we can talk. Arthur's face lit up with a fragile, hopeful smile. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. I unlocked the door to the bakery and led them inside. The familiar smell of fresh bread and coffee enveloped me, wrapping me in a cocoon of comfort and safety. I moved behind the counter, automatically reaching for the espresso machine, letting the familiar motions calm my racing heart. Arthur and Margaret sat at the communal table, watching me with a mixture of nervousness and awe. I poured 3 cups of coffee and carried them over, sliding into a seat across from them. Tell me everything, I said. About you, about my mother, about the family I never knew. And Arthur started talking. He told me about his childhood, about the farm he'd grown up on, about his parents who had been stern and unyielding. He told me about his daughter, my mother, and the fierce, independent spirit that had always made her different from the rest of the family. He told me about the fight that had torn them apart, a stupid argument about her refusal to marry the man he'd chosen for her. I was so proud, he said, his voice raw. I thought I knew what was best for her. And when she refused, I was too stubborn to accept it. I threw her out. I told her she was no longer my daughter. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I listened, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. The trust fund. The secret inheritance. My mother's refusal to talk about her past. It all made sense now. She never stopped loving you, I said. She never talked about you, but she loved you. I could see it in the way she looked at old photographs, the way she'd go quiet when someone mentioned family. She missed you. She just didn't know how to say it. Arthur nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. I missed her too, every single day. I thought about her constantly, wondered where she was, how she was doing. And when I found out she'd died, I wanted to die too. I reached across the table, taking his hand. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. We sat there, the 3 of us, hands intertwined across the table. The bakery was quiet, the last rays of sunlight streaming through the windows, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. I want to do something, I said, breaking the silence. Something to honor my mother. Something that brings us all together. Like what? Margaret asked. A family recipe, I said. My mother had a recipe for cinnamon rolls that she used to make for me on special occasions. I want to put it on the menu. I want to call them Dottie's Legacy Rolls. And I want you both to be there when I do. A grand reopening, of sorts. A new beginning. Arthur's eyes widened. You'd want me there after everything I've done? After everything we've all done? I said. We've all made mistakes. We've all hurt each other. But we're still here. We're still family. And I think that's worth celebrating. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening. She would have loved this, she said. Your mother. She would have loved seeing us all together. I know, I said. That's why I'm doing it. The grand reopening was 2 weeks later. The bakery was packed, filled with regulars and newcomers, friends and family. Mark was there, standing in the corner with a cup of coffee, watching me with a quiet, loving smile. Chloe was there too, her fiancé-turned-ex-boyfriend nowhere in sight, her face lighter and freer than I'd ever seen it. Arthur and Margaret stood behind the counter with me, their arms linked, their faces shining with pride. I'd invited the local newspaper, and a photographer was snapping pictures of the three of us, the newly reunited family. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, raising my voice above the chatter, "I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Today is a celebration of my mother, Dottie Carter, who gave me everything I have. A celebration of family, both the one I was born into and the one I found along the way. And a celebration of new beginnings." The crowd erupted into applause. I turned to Arthur and Margaret, pulling them into a hug. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for being here, for being my family." "Thank you for giving us a chance," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "For giving me a chance." I stepped back, wiping the tears from my eyes. "Now," I said, gesturing to the display case, "who wants to try the first batch of Dottie's legacy rolls?" The lines stretched out the door. I worked quickly, efficiently, handing out plates of cinnamon rolls to eager customers. The rolls were warm, gooey, perfect, just like my mother used to make them. Everyone loved them. They asked for the recipe, asked for more, asked when I'd be making them again. I laughed, the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. "Every day," I said. "Starting tomorrow, they'll be on the menu every day." When the rush finally died down, I stood in the empty bakery, looking out at the street. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. My mother's photo sat on the mantelpiece, her smile bright and eternal. "I did it, Mom," I whispered. "I built something. I found a family. I made you proud." I didn't hear a response, but I felt one. A warmth, a presence, a love that transcended death. It wrapped around me like a hug, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that she was there. She'd always been there, and she always would be.